3 years of marriage without touching her. Until the millionaire chose to claim his wife. 3 years of marriage without touching her until the millionaire chose to claim his wife. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. On the surface, she was the wife of one of the richest men in the city, a man whose name could make entire companies tremble. For 3 years, her marriage contract had been the subject of whispers. 3 years of living under the same roof. 3 years of hearing the ticking of the grandfather clock in the lonely mansion at night, and yet, not once had he touched her. Her name was Emily. She was the daughter of a modest family that had been pulled into the orbit of the powerful Carter Empire. The marriage had been arranged under the banner of business alliances and saving her father's failing company. She had agreed, believing perhaps that even if love was absent, respect could grow. But as the years passed, silence and distance became her only companions. Every morning she placed the wedding ring on her finger, the gold band shining as if brand new. To her, it was not a symbol of love, but a reminder that she was living in a marriage of glass, clear to the outside world, but fragile and empty within. The house staff spoke of her with pity. "The Mrs. Carter," they whispered, as if the title was heavier than gold chains. At social events, she stood beside her husband, Ethan Carter. The millionaire everyone revered. He would place his hand lightly on her back for the cameras, smile that practiced smile, and then retreat into his world of power and secrecy. To the press, they were a picture-perfect couple. To Emily, it felt like standing on a frozen lake, beautiful but deadly, with cracks running just beneath the surface. She often asked herself in the quiet of her bedroom, "Am I truly his wife, or just a name on a contract he signed 3 years ago?" Ethan never gave her an answer. His face was unreadable, his gestures precise, his presence overwhelming. The only intimacy he offered was silence, and sometimes that silence felt louder than shouting. But everything was about to change, because one evening, at a glittering gala filled with the city's elite, someone dared to insult her openly, calling her nothing more than a decorative wife who did not even share her husband's bed. The words were sharp enough to draw blood. For the first time in 3 years, Ethan Carter did not stay silent. He rose from his chair, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with a fury no one had ever seen before. And in that moment, Emily's heart began to race. Because perhaps, just perhaps, the man who had ignored her for 3 years was finally about to claim her as his wife. After the gala night, Emily could not sleep. She replayed the scene in her head, again and again. Ethan standing up for her in front of everyone, his voice firm, his eyes burning. It was so different from the man who had spent 3 years avoiding her touch. For one moment, she had almost believed that he was her husband in truth, not just in name. But when they returned home, the walls of the Carter mansion closed around her once again. Ethan said nothing. He walked past her, removed his suit jacket, and disappeared into his private study. The sound of the heavy wooden door shutting echoed in the silence, and the fragile hope that had flickered inside her chest dimmed once more. The next morning, Emily woke early, as always. She prepared breakfast even though the housekeepers were there to do it. She did it not because anyone asked, but because it gave her a sense of purpose in a life that often felt hollow. By the time she placed the freshly brewed coffee on the table, Ethan was already seated, reading the business section of the newspaper. "Good morning," she said softly. He gave a polite nod without looking up. "Morning." That was all. No warmth, no inquiry about her sleep, no trace of the fire she had seen in his eyes the night before. To Ethan, it seemed as though nothing had changed. To Emily, the contrast was unbearable. She sat across from him, watching him turn the pages with calm precision. Every detail about him seemed untouchable: the sharp cut of his suit, the clean lines of his watch, the way he carried himself with authority. He was a man built of steel and glass, impossible to read, impossible to reach. Emily's fingers brushed against her wedding ring, still shining, still unmarked, as if it had never belonged to a marriage of flesh and blood. She wondered if anyone in the city believed that their union was real, or if everyone saw what she felt every day, that she was a stranger in her own home. When she left the table, she overheard the staff whispering in the hallway. "They say Mr. Carter has never even shared a bedroom with her," one maid murmured. Emily froze, her heart tightening. She did not need reminders. She lived the truth every day. That evening, she gathered the courage to approach Ethan in his study. The room smelled of leather and old books, the walls lined with shelves that displayed his achievements, his trophies, his power. On the desk sat a black safe, its surface gleaming under the lamp. Emily knew what was inside. The contract that bound them. 3 years of signatures and conditions, locked away as if their marriage was just another business deal. "Ethan," she began, her voice steady but her hands trembling. "Why did you defend me last night?" He looked up slowly, his expression unreadable. "Because you are my wife." The words should have been enough, but they were delivered with such cold precision that Emily felt more like a statement of fact than a confession of care. She stepped closer. "Am I really your wife?" she asked, her voice breaking for the first time. "Or am I just a name in that safe?" His jaw tightened. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, pain, regret, perhaps even love, but then it vanished, buried under the weight of his silence. Emily turned away, her chest heavy. She could not understand him. She could not understand why a man who had every resource in the world could not give her the simplest thing she longed for: affection. Alone in her room that night, she pressed her face into the pillow, her heart aching with unanswered questions. The memory of the gala haunted her. The way he had claimed her in front of strangers, and the way he had abandoned her again within their home. Which was the real Ethan Carter? The man who stood up for her, or the man who hid behind silence? And in that question lay the seed of her growing conflict. Should she continue to endure this cold, empty marriage? Or should she demand the truth behind the wall that Ethan had built between them? The days that followed the gala were a blur of silence. Emily tried to busy herself with small routines, watering the roses in the garden, arranging flowers in the grand hallway, sketching in her notebook late at night, but her heart was restless. Ethan had defended her, yes, but he had retreated again into the fortress of his own world. It was during one of these restless days that the storm came. Emily had been invited to a charity luncheon, an event attended by socialites, executives, and the wives of powerful men. Normally, Ethan never accompanied her to these smaller gatherings, and that day was no exception. She arrived alone, her simple elegance drawing both admiration and scrutiny. The room buzzed with conversation, glasses clinking, the smell of roasted chicken and buttered rolls filling the air. Emily took her seat, determined to endure the polite small talk. But the whispers began quickly, like daggers behind her back. 3 years and still no heir. They say he does not even live with her in the same room. Perhaps she was just the cheapest bargain he could make to save her father's failing company. Emily's hands tightened around her napkin. She had learned to endure whispers before, but today, the cruelty struck harder. One woman leaned closer, her voice dripping with disdain. "You know, Mrs. Carter, a wife who cannot even keep her husband's interest is hardly a wife at all." The words cut through Emily like a blade. She could feel the heat rising in her chest, her pride burning. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but her throat closed with humiliation. The eyes of the room turned toward her, hungry for her reaction. And then, before she could stand, a sudden silence fell over the table. A commanding presence filled the air. Ethan Carter. He was not supposed to be there, yet there he stood, tall and imposing, dressed in a dark suit that seemed to silence the very air around him. His gaze swept the room, cold and sharp as steel, until it landed on the woman who had spoken. "Be very careful with your words," he said, his voice low but powerful enough for every corner of the room to hear. "Emily Carter is my wife. She is under my name, under my protection, and anyone who dares to insult her dares to insult me." The room froze. Forks clattered against plates. No one moved. No one spoke. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She stared at him, stunned. This was not the Ethan she knew in the quiet halls of their mansion. This was a man who commanded fear, who defended her openly, who claimed her without hesitation. He stepped closer to her, his hand reaching for his jacket. With a deliberate motion, he draped it over her shoulders, shielding her from the icy stares of the women around her. The weight of the fabric was heavy, but the gesture was heavier still. It was the first time in 3 years that he had touched her with any sense of possession. "Let us go," he said firmly, offering his arm. Emily rose slowly, every pair of eyes following them as they walked out together. Her heart pounded, confusion swirling inside her. Was this the real Ethan Carter? The man who would let her go cold in the silence of their home, yet claim her fiercely in front of strangers? Back in the car, the silence between them was suffocating. Emily clutched the jacket around her shoulders, inhaling the faint scent of his cologne. She wanted to speak, to demand an explanation, but her lips trembled with words unspoken. Finally, she whispered, "Why did you come?" Ethan's eyes remained fixed on the road ahead. Because it was necessary. Necessary. The word echoed in her mind like a cruel joke. To him, everything was duty, obligation, necessity. And yet, her heart betrayed her. Because for the first time in years, she felt what it was like to be seen, to be defended, to be acknowledged as his wife. That night, long after they had returned to the mansion, Emily stood alone in front of the mirror in her bedroom. She touched the lapel of his jacket still hanging on her shoulders. Her reflection stared back at her, a woman caught between cold reality and dangerous hope. She whispered to herself, "Which one is the real Ethan Carter? The stranger I live with, or the man who claimed me today?" And as the question lingered in the silence, Emily knew that something had shifted. The fragile contract that had defined their marriage was beginning to crack. The following week brought with it an unexpected twist. A sudden scandal erupted in the business press. One of Ethan Carter's competitors leaked a rumor that his marriage was nothing more than a facade, a contract to secure financial power. The tabloids devoured it. Headlines splashed across glossy covers: "The untouched wife of the millionaire," and 3 years, no heir, a marriage of convenience. Emily saw the articles while passing a newsstand. Her chest tightened as she stared at the pictures, her own image beside Ethan's, captured from public events, her smile always polite but never truly alive. To the world, it looked exactly as the rumors claimed: cold, empty, unreal. When she returned to the mansion, she found Ethan waiting in the sitting room, his jaw set, the newspaper folded neatly on the table. "We are going to the Hamptons this weekend," he announced without preamble. Emily blinked. "Why?" "Because the world thinks our marriage is fake," he said, his tone clipped. "We will show them otherwise." His words carried the weight of command, not invitation. Emily's heart raced. The idea of being forced to act like a real couple both terrified and thrilled her. That weekend, the sprawling Carter estate in the Hamptons became their stage. Staff buzzed around preparing guest rooms, catering, and photographs that would inevitably make their way into society pages. To the outside world, it would look like a perfect weekend getaway for the Carters. To Emily, it felt like stepping into a play where every gesture, every glance, would be scrutinized. From the moment they arrived, Ethan kept close to her. At dinners, he pulled out her chair. At the beach, he walked beside her, his hand occasionally brushing against hers. At night, when guests lingered, he rested his arm on the back of her chair, in a way that looked natural to outsiders but felt impossibly foreign to Emily. She could not ignore the way her heart leapt each time he touched her, even if it was just for show. For years, she had longed for even the smallest sign of affection. Now that it was happening, it was wrapped in suspicion. Was it real? Or was it all for appearances? Late one evening, after the guests retired, Emily found herself alone with Ethan on the balcony overlooking the ocean. The moonlight painted the waves silver, and the salty breeze tugged at her dress. She stood quietly, her arms wrapped around herself, until his voice broke the silence. "You did well today," he said softly. She turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "Do you mean I played the role of your wife well?" His gaze lingered on her, unreadable as always. "You are my wife." The words echoed between them, heavy with meanings unsaid. Emily wanted to believe them, but the walls he had built around himself remained unbroken. Inside the mansion, the staff had prepared only one bedroom for them, a deliberate arrangement to silence gossip. Emily felt her pulse quicken when she realized it. She hesitated at the doorway, her hand hovering on the frame, unsure if she should step inside. Ethan noticed. "It is only for appearances," he said calmly, though there was a flicker of tension in his voice. That night, they shared the same room for the first time in 3 years. Ethan stayed on one side of the bed, perfectly still, while Emily lay awake on the other, her heart pounding. The distance between them was only a few inches, but it felt like an entire ocean. As she stared at the ceiling, she wondered if this forced closeness would finally break the silence or shatter her heart completely. Because for the first time, Emily realized that pretending to be a real wife might awaken feelings too real to ignore. The morning after their forced night in the same room, Emily woke to find Ethan already dressed, his tie perfectly knotted, his expression unreadable. He was seated at the edge of the bed, scanning through documents on his tablet as though the intimacy of the night before had meant nothing at all. For Emily, it had meant everything. Lying only inches away from him, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, had ignited emotions she could no longer bury. It was both a comfort and a torment. Now, seeing him so detached, those emotions erupted like a storm inside her chest. She sat up abruptly. "Ethan, we need to talk." He glanced at her briefly. "About what?" Her voice trembled with the weight of 3 years of silence. "About us. About this marriage. 3 years, Ethan. 3 years we have been bound by vows, and yet you have never once reached for me as a husband should. Do you know what that feels like? To live like a shadow in your own marriage?" Ethan's jaw tightened. He set the tablet aside but said nothing. Emily's eyes burned as she continued, her voice breaking. "Do you think I have not heard the whispers? Do you think I do not know what people say? That I am nothing more than a contract signed to rescue my father's company. That I am not a wife, but a bargain? And you," her breath hitched, "you have done nothing to prove them wrong." The words hung heavy in the air. For the first time, Ethan's calm mask began to crack. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, his chest rising and falling with restrained fury. "Emily," he said finally, his voice low, "you do not understand." "Then make me understand," she cried. Her hand reached for the wedding ring on her finger, her grip tightening. "If I am only a name on a piece of paper, then tell me, because I cannot keep living like this, waiting for something that will never come." With trembling fingers, she pulled the ring from her hand and set it on the nightstand. The metallic sound echoed through the room like a final judgment. Ethan's eyes locked on the ring. His expression darkened, a storm of conflict raging beneath the surface. He stood abruptly, his height towering over her, but instead of anger, there was something else in his gaze: fear, grief, a vulnerability he could not hide. "You think I wanted this?" His voice was raw now, stripped of its usual control. "You think I have not wanted to claim you every single day for the past 3 years?" Emily's breath caught, stunned by his confession. But before she could speak, he turned away, his hands gripping the edge of the dresser, as if holding himself together. "I have kept my distance for reasons you cannot yet know," he said, his voice trembling. "Not because you are unworthy, but because—" He cut himself off, shaking his head as if revealing more would destroy him. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. She stepped closer, her voice softer now. "Then tell me, please. If there is a reason, do not keep it locked away, because your silence is killing me." For a moment, Ethan remained frozen, his back to her. Then, with a heavy breath, he whispered, "If I open that safe, Emily, everything will change." Her eyes widened at his words, her heart pounding. The safe, the contract, the truth. And in that instant, Emily realized that the breaking point of their marriage was not just about affection, it was about secrets buried deep. Secrets that had kept them apart for 3 long years. The silence in the bedroom stretched thin, every second heavy with unspoken truths. Emily stood frozen, her bare finger aching where her wedding ring had rested moments ago. Ethan's words echoed in her mind. "If I open that safe, everything will change." Her voice wavered. "Then open it, Ethan. Stop hiding behind silence. Stop hiding from me." His broad shoulders stiffened. For a long moment, he remained motionless, his back to her as if waging a private war. Then, with a decisive movement, he crossed the room toward the black safe. Emily's breath caught as he spun the dial, the metallic clicks cutting through the silence. Finally, the door swung open, and inside lay the thick envelope that had defined their marriage, the contract. Ethan pulled it out, his hands trembling despite his effort to appear steady. He turned to face her, his eyes raw and unguarded for the first time. "This," he said, holding up the envelope, "was never supposed to be permanent. 3 years, that was the deal. I told myself I would let you go when it was over, that I would never chain you to a man like me. I thought it was the only way to protect you." Emily's brows furrowed, her chest tightening. Protect me. From what? Ethan's jaw clenched, his voice dropped, almost breaking. From my past, from the enemies that come with my name, from the kind of life I live. I did not want you to suffer for choices that were never yours. So I stayed away. I kept my distance. I let the world believe whatever they wanted, if it meant you would remain untouched by the darkness I carry. Emily shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. And you thought silence would protect me? Do you not understand, Ethan? Your distance hurt more than any enemy ever could. You thought you were sparing me, but you were breaking me every single day. Ethan's composure shattered. With a sudden motion, he ripped the contract in half, the papers tearing with a sound that echoed like thunder. He let the pieces fall to the floor between them. No more contracts, he declared, his voice fierce but filled with anguish. No more lies. Emily, I love you. I have loved you from the very beginning. Every day I fought myself. Every night I wanted to reach for you but forced myself to stay away, and I cannot do it anymore. The confession struck Emily like a tidal wave. She stared at him, her heart pounding, torn between anger and overwhelming relief. You love me? She whispered, her voice trembling. His eyes locked onto hers, filled with pain and sincerity. More than my own life, more than anything I own. But I was a coward. I let fear dictate our marriage, and in doing so, I hurt the one person I swore to protect. Emily stepped closer, her tears blurring her vision. For the first time, she saw him not as the untouchable millionaire, but as a man stripped bare, haunted by guilt, desperate for redemption. Her hand reached up, brushing against his cheek. All I ever wanted was the truth, Ethan. Not your power, not your wealth, just you. Ethan closed his eyes at her touch, his breath shuddering. Then you have me. All of me. No more walls. No more contracts. The remnants of the torn papers lay scattered at their feet, symbols of the 3 years of distance that had finally come to an end. And in that moment, as their foreheads touched and their tears mingled, Emily knew the truth she had longed for had finally been revealed. For the first time, their marriage was real. The next evening, Ethan and Emily attended a high-profile charity gala, one of the most scrutinized events of the year. Rumors about their marriage had not yet died down. In fact, after the leaked scandal, every reporter in the city was waiting for a glimpse of the Carters. To them, the couple was no longer just a business alliance but a living headline. Emily walked beside Ethan, her hand resting on his arm. For the first time, she felt the weight of his presence not as a burden, but as a shield. He had torn the contract apart. He had confessed his love. Yet tonight, the world would demand proof. As they entered the ballroom, the flash of cameras lit up like fireworks. Questions were shouted over the velvet ropes. Is it true your marriage was only a deal? Mrs. Carter, do you live separately? Mr. Carter, are you seeking an annulment? Ethan stopped in his tracks. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the crowd of reporters. Then he did something that stunned everyone, including Emily. He pulled her close, his arm wrapping firmly around her waist. His voice carried over the chaos, steady and commanding. Enough. Listen well. This woman is my wife. She has always been my wife, and I will not allow anyone to question her place by my side again. The ballroom fell silent, the noise outside muffled by his words. Every camera pointed at them, every eye fixed on the man who had finally shattered his silence. Emily's heart raced as Ethan turned to face her. In front of hundreds of guests, with the press recording every second, he cupped her face in his hands. His voice dropped, softer now, but loud enough for all to hear. Emily, I love you. I should have said it years ago, but I am saying it now. Here, where the whole world can hear me. You are not my contract. You are my wife, my partner, and the only woman I will ever claim as mine. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Emily's vision blurred with tears. She could not breathe, could not think, only feel the raw truth pouring from him. And then, before she could stop herself, she whispered back, Ethan, I love you too. The room erupted as Ethan lowered his lips to hers, sealing the confession with their first true kiss. The flashes of cameras went wild, the crowd buzzing with shock and awe. But for Emily, none of it mattered. In that moment, it was only the two of them, their marriage reborn in fire and truth. When they finally pulled apart, Ethan pressed his forehead against hers, whispering just for her, "No more hiding, Emily. From this day on, the world will know you are mine." And for the first time, Emily believed him. The ride home from the gala was quiet, but it was not the heavy silence that had haunted Emily for 3 years. This silence was warm, filled with unspoken promises. Ethan held her hand the entire way, his thumb brushing lightly over her skin as if afraid to let go. When they arrived back at the mansion, the world outside no longer mattered. The cameras, the headlines, the gossip, all of it faded. What remained was the truth they had finally spoken aloud. Ethan led her into the study, where torn fragments of the contract still littered the floor. He paused, his eyes dark with regret. "Emily, I cannot change the past, but I can spend every day from now on making it right." He reached for her hand, guiding her closer. Then, with deliberate care, he picked up her wedding ring from the nightstand where she had left it days ago. He held it out, his voice steady but filled with emotion. This time, not as a symbol of a bargain. This time, as a promise. Emily's chest tightened as he slid the ring back onto her finger. For the first time, the simple band of gold felt heavy, not with emptiness, but with meaning. Her tears spilled as she whispered, "I waited 3 years for this moment." Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were the only thing keeping him alive. His voice was rough against her ear. "And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt me again." Their lips met once more, softer than the kiss at the gala, but deeper, more intimate. It was not for the cameras, not for appearances, but for them alone. Later that night, as they lay side by side in the same bed, Emily reached for his hand beneath the sheets. For the first time, Ethan did not pull away. His fingers entwined with hers, warm and steady. In the quiet of the mansion, where loneliness had once reigned, Emily finally felt what it meant to be loved. In the weeks that followed, the narrative around the Carters began to shift. What had once been whispers of scandal now transformed into headlines of admiration. Newspapers printed photographs of Ethan and Emily together, their hands intertwined, their smiles genuine. What the world had doubted, Ethan had erased with both his public declaration and his private devotion. But Ethan was not content with words alone. He took deliberate steps to correct the wrongs Emily had endured. The very women who had mocked her at the luncheon were left stunned when Ethan revoked their company's contracts with Carter Enterprises. "No one disrespects my wife," he declared at a press conference, his voice resolute. For Emily, it was not about revenge. It was about justice, about finally being seen and defended not as a pawn, but as a partner. At home, their life transformed. The grand mansion that had once echoed with loneliness now felt alive. Emily's laughter filled the halls, her paintings and sketches decorating walls that had been bare for years. Ethan spent less time buried in boardrooms, and more time by her side, learning the small rituals of a real marriage, sharing breakfast, walking in the garden, even reading together at night. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan guided her to the terrace. The air was warm, the sky painted in shades of gold and crimson. He knelt before her, not with a contract in his hands, but with his heart laid bare. "Emily," he said, his voice steady and full, "I once asked you to be my wife through an agreement on paper. Today, I ask you again, but this time, with no conditions, no limits, only love. Will you stay with me? Not because you must, but because you choose to." Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she bent down to him, her hands cupping his face. "Ethan, I was yours long before tonight. I choose you, always." He slipped a new diamond ring onto her finger, its brilliance catching the last rays of the setting Sunday. The first ring had been a symbol of obligation. This one was a promise of forever. Hand in hand, they stood together, no longer bound by silence or contracts, but by love proven through action and authenticity. And as they faced the horizon, Emily knew that the world could say what it wanted because she had found her justice, her dignity, and her happily ever after.